61st minute. The idea that you can have a conversation for 60 minutes and ultimately the most important part of the conversation actually comes when the conversation is over, when the discussion is over, and every single person who participated in the conversation is faced with the choice and the opportunity to take what it is they discussed and what they learned and then do something with it. Turn it into something unique, turn it into something that is personal, and go out and take again the conversation and what you discussed and make it your own. So right now, this would be the essential 61st minute after just watching The White Rose. And I think the conversation or the question that I would be most curious about is when you were writing it, or as the director, what is it you guys hope would be the takeaway? What do you hope the audience chooses their 61st minute to include when they leave your show and when they leave the experience that you just provided them?
Well, you actually saw the show last night, and it was interesting because you said something to me right afterwards that would be my answer to this. The final song is essentially that 61st minute, that idea that this is a tragic story, and it's very difficult when I started to write this story. How do I put a show out there where our heroes die? It's not the first story where that happens, but trying to find something that's inspirational, something that is a call from history to inspire us to say that there's a reason these people did this. They were willing to risk their lives and ultimately pay with their lives so that other people do things. Sophie's last lines in the show were actually Sophie Scholl's real last lines. I didn't write those were literally Sophie's lines. So that idea that what does my death matter if through it thousands are called to action, are motivated to do something. So that idea that where they're trying to call from history and say, find your own way. Don't do what we're doing. Find your way to act. Find your thing to resist. Find that oppression that you want to stand up to, and then find your own way and then act on it. So that's my instruction.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, my job as a director is to basically put first, second, and third on my 4-prong list to serve the playwright and the writer. So in knowing that for Brian that was so important for him, it was also very important for me when working with the actors and also working with Brian the writer and Natalie Bryce, our amazing composer, is making sure that we never politicize anything, that we really speak truth to what actually happened with these White Rose members, but also allow the audience to have their own personal takeaway, not to spoon feed any left or right, red, blue, but to just allow, this is what these people did, to speak their truth to power. The baton by the end of We Will Not Be Silent should be then to the audience to decide for themselves what that means for them. And so, we had a lot of really beautiful and also difficult discussions in the rehearsal process of what speaking truth to power not only meant for us as a collective world and society, but as individuals. The individuals who work for 8 shows a week were going to be telling this story. So it brought up some beautiful conversation. And for me, as the director, when I get to kind of sneak back in and check in on the show, I love watching audience members before they enter the theater and then what happens afterwards. And it's been fascinating to see the conversations that they had before the show and afterwards. So that's been basically my biggest joy, to see how much this show has affected people to have actual conversations.
Yeah, that's so bad.
I was just gonna piggyback on Will taking words that I put on the page and bringing them to life. One of the big things that happens in the show is what really happened in history when Hans and Sophie boldly threw the leaflets off the second-story balcony in the atrium of the university, and that's what led to them being caught. It's a significant and a dramatic event, but one of the reasons that we chose to, it wasn't just for a wow factor of hey, let's scatter some leaflets over the audience. It is an intentional breaking of the fourth wall. It is meaning to be a call to action to the people who are sitting here, not just, oh, I'm watching the show. It's like, oh no, I'm being called to action. This is something that it's like, and then the final song, they're intentionally, the actors were choosing to look at people and sing the song to them, especially people who had leaflets in their hands. That was part of the staging, taking the words and putting it into something very visceral.
Yeah, that's so powerful. In the conversation we had prior to this evening, we talked about places and opportunities for pilot lights to be lit, for creativity to spark something in everybody that allows them to develop further passions, that allows them to engage in a new way. And I think for people, everybody in the audience, all of the people that continue to come and see the show, this is lighting a pilot, this is lighting a pilot light, not just in people's creative spaces, but in what it makes them think about and what it makes them think about in their own lives when they leave the show. I would be curious, a different iteration of the question we a little bit spoke about before, but I think it's helpful to share with even more people. What do the spaces and the environments in which pilot lights are lit, for you in particular, for people that you know about, what do those environments look like, and in what ways are the arts and education opportunities, in conjunction with those pilot lighting moments? What, in your guys' experiences, does that look like?
Well, I was a classroom teacher for 20 years, so there are many moments that were literally a student. You can see it sometimes. Sometimes it is clear. Sometimes it's a slow burn, right? So it's not just a pilot light. It's just kind of a simmer. But then it gets there, and there's something, and it can be that with a light bulb, or it's just kind of coming around to a realization, or coming into their own, really, and the ability of a student to suddenly take some ownership into their thought process instead of just repeating things and regurgitating what they were, but like suddenly challenging and questioning and coming up with something, an original thought. So that was always inspiring to me. And then suddenly when I shifted to creating a piece like this, I always kept that in mind. And one of my favorite experiences in the last 12 weeks has been having students in this room and talking to them, sometimes in the space doing a talkback, or in the lobby afterwards, and just talking to students, because I'm not in the classroom anymore, and then seeing that and seeing people that maybe attach themselves to something. They were engaged by a particular character. They were, this character, what happened to Frederick? What happened to him? And I'm like, I would turn it around and go, good question, what happened to him? And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, you're the writer. I'm like, exactly, what do you think happened to him? What did he do? What about Lila at the end? What about that? And it was like, so part of this is not telling people, but asking them to think about it, asking them to go, well, what do you think? So that's something that's really helped take me from being a classroom teacher to suddenly going, oh, you can still light that spark and have people be inspired by something and question things. And there's no right or wrong answer when you're interpreting art. Yeah. So sometimes I wrote something and I meant this, but someone's taking something else from it, and that's okay too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for me, in terms of the arts and education, I began my career as a performer, mainly with my twin brother Anthony, who still is an amazing performer. Look him up, AnthonyNunciata.com. We had a 25-year career. I headlined Carnegie Hall, which is all sweet and dandy, in December of 2016. But I know this sounds woo-woo, but the reason why I wanted to stick out my career with my brother for so long was to go downstage center on Zero at Carnegie Hall to thank my parents and my teachers. And you bet when I got my contract, I was not asking for red M&Ms in my dressing room. I told them that I wanted as many comps as possible for my teachers. So you bet for those 2 sold-out shows, in the front 2 rows were my teachers from elementary school, middle school, high school, and college. And I knew from that moment on too, that when I entered my bliss as a director, that I would make sure that every single room that I had the great fortune to lead, that it would be in a safe space where best idea wins, and that every single person that walks in that room, whether they are the lead or the intern, that everyone deserves the opportunity to take court downstage center in what their Carnegie Hall may be. And so I love doing talkbacks like this because it also allows hopefully conversation even after this. In whatever career you may be in, your kids may be in, your grandkids may be in, that we all have the opportunity, like the White Rose did, to, through their actions, provide safe spaces for people to lead their best lives. And so, I know I'm now giving a TED talk, sorry, but I'm so grateful for you, for Kathleen, for everyone who does these types of talkbacks to provide great conversation like this. And
I think it's clear. I mean, it's been clear the entire conversation, the show, how it came to life, where it started, the power in evolving and doing what you believe is right and taking that first step to live out what you think is right. They weren't by trade teachers, and yet what they taught the people in their lives and what they are continuing to teach all of us is so powerful. And as everybody leaves this evening, and when they wake up tomorrow, I hope that the continued thought that you guys have both sort of prompted for us and shared is what ways can you be a teacher? And what ways are you able to find teachers in all the different parts of your world and then learn from them? What moments can you take where you turn that 61st minute into something really powerful? Whether the 60 minutes prior, whether the 60 minutes prior were intentionally a learning opportunity or not, where can you find that 61st minute? Where can you develop the courage to, pursue it in a way that is really meaningful? And then hopefully you'll have the great opportunity of being able to do something tremendous and bring all those teachers back together to support you as you sort of perform, whatever that stage looks like. So, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to have, again, seen the show and have a conversation that truly feels meaningful and impactful. So thanks, and thanks everybody for joining the conversation and staying a little bit of extra time.
And does anyone are we allowed to open it up for them to ask questions?
Yes.
Do you have any questions about the show, the process, or I don't know, anything?
I guess what I guess brought you to this story? Like, what was the moment you were like, oh, I have to write?
35 years ago, I was the age of the students. Was in Munich, and as an American, just kind of walking around, I was from San Francisco, and I felt Munich was very similar to San Francisco, had a similar vibe and energy, and I just really liked talking to people. But I also had learned that this was the birthplace of the Nazi Party. This is where Hitler came to power, and I was like, this dark history. And I talked to a local, and he told me about the White Rose, or actually it was more of like, well, but you know about the White Rose. I'm like, no. I'm like, you don't? And they are famous in Germany. There are schools named after them and monuments, and they celebrate the Scholls. Everyone in Germany knows all of the names of the White Rose and what exactly happened. And I just couldn't believe that nobody knew that story. So I was inspired. I wrote a screenplay 35 years ago. Horrible. It's garbage. People today are like, "Ooh, I want to read it." I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't. But you need something to just kind of get it out there. And I put it in a drawer, literally and figuratively. Had a family, had a career, became a teacher. Circled back when I revisited the story, I felt I was now the professor. Like I had gotten to the point where it was like, oh, I had a past where I kind of wanted to do something, but I never really acted on it. That's where I kind of structured into the story where the professor had a past where he kind of worked and then he didn't quite do it and then acted on it. So that's kind of my personal journey into finding my way back into the story is I just felt like it was something that needed to be told. And over this time, still Americans don't know the White Rose.
Sure.
And it's just it's a tragic thing because it's an inspiring story, and especially with today and everything that's going on internationally, domestically, everything, we need truth. We need people finding their own way to fight. We need people who are standing up. It's like all the different little snippets here. It's like that's been my personal journey with it. Thank you. Anyone else?
When it closes here, is it going to be anywhere else, the show? Or?
What a great
Will.
question.
Give
When
that
it
to
closes
Will.
here, is it going anywhere else? Well, that's my mission, baby.
Oh, good.
I
Because
will
it was
say
only here a
this.
few months, right?
I'm sorry?
How long has it been here?
It's been a limited run, and it's always been that. So we close actually on Sunday.
Right, yes, that's why we're
12
still
weeks.
here.
Our world premiere recording was recorded at the world famous Power Station. We have 2 singles out streaming on Spotify and Apple Music. But the full album should be available in May. And I'm going to be taking actually a greater role on Producerially for the next step. Breaking news. But I'm very fortunate to be working with some people in London on another musical that I'm the director of and also co-wrote. But it was while I was speaking with these professionals in London, granted they're not in Munich, Germany, but even in Europe, they know of the White Rose.
Wow.
And that sparked, dare I say, a pilot light within me to say, my goodness, Will, are you gonna wait for other producers to have these conversations, or are you just gonna take it upon yourself? Well, of course I chose door number 2, and I'm hoping that we get to announce in somewhat the near future the next step. But to do it here in New York has been truly a dream come true, but I'm very much looking forward to being a part of the next iteration of Brian's beautiful creation that was just a seedling of an idea 35 years ago.
Oh, that's amazing.
And my personal goal and dream has always been that someday for this show to be in every school in America.
Right.
My daughter's a performer, and it's like she's been in so many shows, and it's like, oh, these young performers want something that means something.
Right.
There's only so many times you can do Seussical and Beauty and the Beast. These are great shows, but what about something new? What about something that is young people standing up and doing what young people today want to do? Have their voice heard. And so I'd love to see universities performing it. I mean, imagine university students performing and playing the university students, and then high schools and things. So that's in the future. So
Well,
And it's wonderful to get the message to continue, because as time goes on, whatever Holocaust survivors, and they're unfortunately less and less.
absolutely.
So this just brings up the whole important topic that it's incredible what you've done.
I actually have a Zoom on Friday with a woman who lives in Kentucky. She's 102, and she was good friends with Sophie Scholl when she was younger.
Wow.
Her daughter reached out and came to the show last night.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, she's really excited. She's not traveling anymore, so she can't come to the show, but she wants to share some of the stories. And she said it's not necessarily extremely well known because my mother's Jewish, and they were good friends in Germany, when they were younger. So it was like, oh my God, it's because the character of Lila,
Right.
I had to create, because in 1943 Munich, there weren't Jews that were known. I mean, they had to hide, and they had to, at that point, the Holocaust had already progressed to the point where they had been moved out of Munich, and so I had to insert that character, and the character itself was created out of composite of real people. But that was one of those things where it's like this, seeing these real people
Right.
coming out and wanting to share their stories. And yes, you're right, there are fewer and fewer of them. So
Any chance to, to film any of it for like any museums and?
yes, I did ask permission, and she said that I can record it. So
Oh,
that's
wonderful.
so I will be doing it. And we had a Holocaust survivor here. We had a family this last week that was actually rescued by a White Rose member, and their entire family, what did they say, 39 people,
Yeah.
would not exist if it weren't for a White Rose member who had actually helped sneak their 2 grandparents out of Germany to safety. So it's like just these stories keep coming out, and those
Wow.
people sought us out because it was
Yeah.
not a well-known story.
Oh, that's amazing. I didn't know that.
Well, yes.
How many more members were there?
there were many members of the White Rose. This was obviously, we focused down on a very limited number of people. There was an additional member that was executed with the larger group, Alex Morel. We kind of created composites of some of the characters. Some of it was for staging, some of it is literally putting on a show is extremely expensive, and the number of actors. I mean, sometimes it comes down to things like that. But there were many members that helped the White Rose. Sometimes they were meeting and having discussions in like salon type settings, risking their lives doing that. There were people that supplied them with ink and paper and money to buy those things, and so it was a larger network. We chose to just kind of peel away and focus on these people here, but it was dozens and dozens of people, and it goes, you know, even beyond that to the outer reaches with other resistance groups that they started connecting with. And it was the true story that they had arranged a meeting with the resistance person that was going to lead them to the resistance in Berlin, and that person literally was sitting on a corner waiting for a secret meeting with Hans Scholl, unbeknownst to them that Hans had just been executed that morning in Munich. So they were waiting. So it's kind of one of those like, what would have happened if the resistance groups had been able to connect to that point?
I was just being a teacher, and when in the show, when the teacher becomes the student, he talks about, you know, I'm glad that I'm not running this meeting. You know, did that come both from the story itself and your personal experience?
Yes. So he was a mentor to the group, and then he joined the group.
Right.
So there's lots. I mean, many of these things and these storylines come from their writings, come from their journals, and come from the descriptions. And Kurt Huber was their professor and was a mentor, but then eventually he joined, and they wrote some of the leaflets, you know, most of the text, and then some of them collaborated, and so they would meet together. And so he became, instead of their mentor, just one of the members of the group. I think we do have to wrap up because there are people that we need to clear out of the space. But thank you very much for sticking around. We really appreciate
Thank you
it.
so much. You
Thank
can
you.
find the White Rose at White Rose Musical on all the social
Yes.
handles. Thank you all so much, and thank you so much.